Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and video one of two videos. I want to cover 5 tips on not getting dropped in a group ride. And this could be a group ride of any, well, we'll get more into that. So I'll cover 5 in this video and 5 in the second video. And the reason I want to cover it in 2 videos is I want to make sure that when I give the idea and develop the idea, I want to spend some time with each one of the tips. And let's talk about group riding, because it doesn't actually have to mean a 50-person group ride. Doesn't have to be the Saturday Hammerfest or the Wednesday World Championships. It could be any group. Anything more than 2 or 3 riders is conceivably a group. But it applies more towards a larger group setting. It applies more if you have a lot of varying skill levels and abilities, strengths and weaknesses. And then also it can work in road racing and criteriums, right? So any type of group setting. All right. So anyway, let's get started with number 1. And oh, by the way, a lot of this comes from a weaker type rider like myself. When you are a weaker type rider, as far as like the group of people you may ride with, you really need to ride very smart, very efficiently, because you just don't have the horsepower, right? So when I give you these tips, it's not because I'm the strongest guy in my group or I win the town sign sprint every Saturday. No, it's because over the years I've had to learn how to ride with efficiency, keeping myself in control so I can stay in a group of much stronger riders. Okay, so the first thing I wish to tell you about is get to the front. Ride in the very front of the group. Maybe the first third or the first quarter, just depends how big the group is, right? So if you got, 50, 60 riders, get into the front of the group. The reason you want to be in the front of the group, because I know that a lot of times you may want to ride towards the back and say, well, I don't want to mix it up there because that's where all the strong riders are. That's where all the mayhem is going to be, and I'm just not strong enough to ride up there. Well, guess what? You have to change that around a little bit. If you ride in the front, your pace is a lot steadier. Okay? The front of the pack, and oh, by the way, that's where all the other strong riders are, which is a good thing for you because they are steady, they are strong, they typically hold a good line. They typically do not allow gaps to open up. They don't surge. They're smart riders, and so they stay towards the front because they know if they are in the back, they are constantly having to close gaps and go around people that let a gap open up. So the front is the safest part of the pack as well as the steadiest part of the pack. So we just talked about steadiness. Let's talk about safety. If you can see what's ahead of you, if you can see that a car door is about to open up, or at least there's a pedestrian that is walking around their car, you can see that. You're in the first third, the first quarter of the group. So you can see a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of people moving around, but you could still get pretty good sight lines up the road. So it's very important that if you want to ride steady and with efficiency, you get towards the front of the group. You want to be able that if a gap opens up, you can fill that gap. You know, you go from 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide, and then all of a sudden it starts to move, and then you're starting to see that, well, this is no longer 3 wide, it's going to be 2 wide. It's going to be single file here in just a second. So you need to fill in, right? It's like a zipper. You need to kind of like get yourself meshed in with the other riders. So you want to be able to fill gaps, okay? And or you see that a gap is starting to open up. You're like looking around and follow the wheels as the gaps start to fill up. If you're in the back, it's an accordion effect all the time, up and back, up and back. And I often tell people this. If you're in the front, you make up 3 or 4 feet, 5 or 6 feet. Towards the middle, by the time it gets back there, it's probably 10 feet. And by the time it gets to the back, that's 20 feet. And so at the front, you just have to do a little bit of effort to get back into the draft, get back into the wheels. Middle, you got to do a lot more effort. Back, you have to do an enormous amount of effort. And oh, by the way, you've only got a few of those efforts on a ride. You may only have, 5, 10, 15 of those efforts, and then eventually you popped off the back. All right, so tip number 1, ride in the first third, first quarter of that group so you can see everything and your pace is nice and steady. Number 2, move up when it's easy to move up. There are a lot of times that there's surges and then, the pace backs off a little bit, and then there's another surge and the pace backs off. Feel that rhythm within the pack, and okay, all right, this looks like we're gonna settle in a little bit. Boom, start moving up. Start moving up, start moving up. 1 or 2 wheels, 3 wheels. You know who the guys are and gals that let a gap open up. So start moving up. And do it when it takes the least amount of effort to do. Okay? You're always trying to save energy. The funny thing is, when you go home and look at your power data, you want to see the least amount of power being used to have done a successful group ride. Counter to what people think, you want to see these high power numbers. No, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see that unless that was your training objective for the day. But you want to see the least amount of power being used to accomplish the task of staying in the wheels. So move up when it's easy to move up. Okay? That way, when it surges again, if there are stronger riders that are around you, behind you, next to you, it starts to string out, then that zipper happens again, everyone starts to mesh in, boom, you can slot in. All right, so that's number 2, move up when it's easy. Number 3, start hills near the front. Or if you don't have hills in your neighborhood, in the route that you folks do, when the speed is going to pick up. Every time we get through this section, the pace picks up because now we don't have any lights and now the hammer goes down. That's going to happen. But if it's a climb, same thing. Move to the front. And so while the effort is really hard, you slowly start sliding back. You're still working hard, but not as hard as the very front of the group. Okay? So if you got a power meter and you could see that if I move towards the front and I'm doing, 4, 5 watts per kilo, and the pack is still moving away, I can eventually reconnect to that. But if you're doing 6 watts per kilo, you might not be able to catch the back of that train when it goes up and over that hill. Okay, we have hills here that are short rollers, 1 or 2 minute efforts, or you can have 5-6 minute efforts. And then of course we have longer climbs, 10, 20, 30 minute climbs, or mountains, 1 to 2 hour climbs, right? So you gauge that effort, and you say to yourself, okay, we're about to hit this climb, move up when it's easy. So number 2, because there will be some type of regrouping or slowing of the pace. Everyone wants to take a quick breather before they hit the climb. These aren't like pro races where the throttle is full on as they're entering the base of a climb and narrowing things down. It just, group rides aren't like professional races. So move up when it's easy, get to the front of the pack as you start a climb or a designated fast section. So yeah, you can climb it slower than everyone else. It's steadier. You have sliding space, which might make it safer for you as well. Kind of move over to the right. You don't have to be so, the effort isn't so hard that you're brain dead because you're just tapped out. Just kind of move over and you can kind of see the pace going up. And then, of course, reconnect on the way down. Number 4, stay in the draft. Now, obviously, this sounds so obvious. Stay in the draft. Yes, stay in the draft can be a very difficult thing, but it's a very necessary thing. Staying in the draft means things like, okay, I know this is a bigger rider than me. I know he has a good draft that I can take advantage of, and you try to ride that wheel and try to stay in that draft. As soon as that starts to space out, maybe he's a stronger rider and he starts to pull away from you, it's time. It's time to bear down and ramp up quickly, because 2 feet becomes 3 feet becomes 6. It happens that fast. And if the wind is blowing in a certain direction, it's like a hot knife through butter. When you let a little gap open up, within seconds, it's a big gap, and it's an unsurmountable gap for you without, really going really hard to close that gap. Okay. Let me just check my notes. So stay in the draft. But there's a delicate balance. So you have to stay in a draft. You got that big rider we were just talking about, but you still have to have sight lines. You still need to be able to look. And so I tell people to look over that rider's shoulder. You're not looking down at the wheel. You eventually get experienced enough that when you're looking over the rider's shoulder, what that means to the gap to his front wheel. Your front wheel to his rear wheel. You start to know what that looks like. Okay, that's his shoulder, that's his wheel. I'm good. So you need your sight lines. You still need to be able to look around, and you need to be able to, be in the proper draft, but not too close that if he or she makes any type of fast change of line or has to hit the brakes or something, that you don't plow into that rear wheel. Obviously, never overlap wheels, right? Here's the rider's rear wheel. Here's your wheel. You don't want to be overlapping it behind, okay? You can get plenty of draft. You don't have to be sitting, with 6 to 8 inches of your wheel overlapping the other rider's wheel. So delicate balance of close but not too close. And there's always an opportunity to put in a little bit more effort to save energy later, right? So you put in a little bit, you burn a little match to stay on that wheel. All right, number 5, and that'll be the last one for this video. Find a good wheel. Learn who the good wheels are. So we talked about the person with the big draft, but let's talk about the person who's just a good diesel engine. This person doesn't like the constant accelerations, doesn't like to have to constantly burn a match to close a gap. He's very smart. He or she is very smart. They know where to be. They know how to navigate through a pack, and they also know what is a good wheel, right? So they know the good wheel. They're following that good wheel, and now you know that they're a good wheel. So the 3 of you, or many more, but that's the wheel you want to be on. Maybe he's a diesel, he or she, maybe they're create a big draft for you, and you can stay in the wheels with them. This person, like I said, doesn't accelerate, doesn't accelerate briskly. By the way, when there's a gap that opens up, please do not get out of the saddle and sprint to close the gap. You need to apply the power, get slow. It's all a matter of perspective, but slowly close the gap. Smoothly close the gap. Don't get up out of the saddle and sprint and close the gap, because you're going to screw up everyone behind you. Okay, so you find that good wheel. That good wheel is the person who knows how to slowly close a gap and not mess up the whole pack behind them. And then lastly, under this segment, these are people that aren't really going to attack the bunch. That's just not how they ride. They're smooth. They want to stay within the wheels. They like being safe. They like being towards the front. They're good pace setters as well. They rotate towards the front, and they pull. They do their work. But they're not the type of people that like to attack. I mean, this could be an amalgamation of different riders, but that's what that good wheel is. You want to, if you're not interested in attacking and doing that kind of stuff, right? I'm talking to you mainly from the perspective of, you've been dropped before, you're trying to figure out, what can I do to not get dropped this Saturday? Okay. All right, so that's the first 5. Got another 5 coming, and I look forward to your comments down below. Tell me if some of these things are, I've known that for years, or wow, I hadn't thought of that. Please make a comment down below. Let's get that discussion going. And please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when I've released part 2 of this 10 tips, might even be 11, who knows, maybe I'll throw a bonus one in there. All right, thank you for your time and your attention. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you up the road.